This episode is sponsored by Well Balanced Nutrition and 360 Health.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Should I belch now or later?
Whenever you feel like
Oh, good morning, everybody. That wasn't supposed to be on there.
Right?
Yeah, actually it was. But I wanted to read a little quote this morning just to inspire everybody. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And that would make you think we might be talking about swimming or something, right?
Maybe.
Or stress or who knows what. But we have a book, and it was dedicated to any person living with IBS. And if you don't know what that means, it's
Irritable Bowel Syndrome.
Who will not settle for a treatment plan that prevents them from living fully. We are grateful to our patients, past, present, and future. It is truly our honor to contribute to your care and well-being. And so today, we're going to talk about Mind Your Gut, the science-based whole-body guide to living well with IBS.
By Kate Scarlata and Dr. Megan Riehl. Tired of feeling stuck in your health journey? At Well Balanced Nutrition, we understand that achieving your health goals isn't just about what you eat. It's about overcoming the mental roadblocks holding you back. Our team of expert nutrition coaches is here to guide you every step of the way, helping you break through mindset barriers and reach your full potential. Don't let mindset barriers stand in the way of your health and happiness. Call Well Balanced Nutrition today and start your journey to a better you. And we are very excited to have a guest with us today. We are really honored to have Lucy Hayhurst, the co-owner of Well Balanced Nutrition.
Yippee, yippee, yippee.
That's so. Yeehaw.
I want to say the one and only, but if you Google Lucy Hayhurst, there's at least 7 to 10 of us.
Oh.
Really?
But, I'm the one that's partner with the one and only Kristen Norton.
I like the Kristen Norton.
The Kristen Norton.
The Kristen Norton and the Lucy Hayhurst.
Yeah, so this is going to be fun to have a guest on with us, and Tim will probably be making some guttural sounds over here as we go along.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I think I don't have irritable bowel syndrome. I have just fully ticked off bowels.
well, Lucy has some life experience, and she has helped lots of clients find some relief with IBS. So we thought she'd be a great addition to this conversation.
Yeah, and these two authors are probably good colleagues for her. So who are these authors?
Yeah, Kate Scarlata is a registered dietitian, very well known in the GI world. And Dr. Megan Riehl, I don't know as much about her. Do you have
Yeah,
info on her?
she's an associate professor of medicine and director of the GI behavioral health of the University of Michigan, where she has a full-time clinical practice. She leads GI behavioral health trainings and provides a mentorship and consultation and lots of other things. So this is published by the Hatchet Group. The Hatchet Group is a publisher that we have bumped into before, but just to remind everybody, they value different and diverse perspectives, and they challenge the accepted thinking, and they have a commitment to diversity. So they want to understand consumers. They want to change the story. They have an owner mentality, which means they do want to make a profit, and they know how to market to that, and they have a growth mindset. So all those are really interesting things when we look at corporations that publish the ideas that we talk about. So that's the kind of little background on the book. It's called a guide, and Kristen, I have run into guides with you before, and I think they're books. And no, this is a guide, and it reminds me a little bit about the one we read about the nose.
Oh.
And because
Why?
there's so many charts and chemical names. And so this book is full. It's structured very nicely. It has an intro that I loved reading and talks about how mental health can make the symptoms worse. And that's why this partnership of these authors and this concept of what we call a dream team, which I think you two are going to talk about as we get into it. But they also, in the book, they did a marvelous discussion of the gut-brain connection and the science-based strategies of behavioral change. Then they talked about the nutritional aspects, And then they talk about key aspects of the gut microbiome. And then they have huge resource list at the back and a thorough
And
bibliography.
recipes.
Yeah, recipes or resources, And I'm sure you tried some of them.
I have not.
See, here's the one I think is going to try the recipes, and she never does it. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, that's the overview of the book. So, how do we jump into this and get started?
Well,
I say what surprised me
yeah.
in my reading. So I've been dealing with IBS for over 10 years now. And I've been working with clients for at least 5 of those 10 years. And I did not expect this book to change my practice, but it really has. And so
Wow.
I'm just like, I find this to be a really great resource for people, but also, like, I think kind of as Eleanor just alluded to, there are some really big scientific terminology, which they do a good job of giving
Yeah.
definitions. But yeah, it's kind of heavy for just like anybody that's off the street that's like, ooh, I just want to know how to make my gut feel better.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone. I think the stats are 11% of the global population has this problem, and the number they gave me was not in percentages, so I calculated it for Americans. It's 13% of Americans, and 2 times as many women. Onset between 20 and 30. Is that true for you? Because you're a woman. Did it onset between 20 and 30 for you?
It sure did.
How about that? So you're one of 13% of the population that's identified. And I bet you there are a lot of people out here that are not identified with it, who just think, oh, it's normal. This is just normal. And the other in the foreword by Dr. Che, who is the chief gastroenterology guy at Michigan Medicine, which is the University of Michigan's academic medicine center, which is pretty cool. And he really respects these 2 authors. He says they have just revolutionized what's going on. And, maybe 30 years ago, if you had this condition, you were kind of sloughed off in the medical system. It's all in your head. It's not a real thing, And so that's what's changed. And that's, I think why Hatchett was interested in this, because thinking about IBS has changed and they want to get the word out there.
Yeah, and still changing. I would say that we have more awareness, but probably not where we could be or should be in terms of providers. But, part of the reason we picked this book when we did is because April is IBS Awareness Month. So for listeners who may not have IBS, with, I think it was 1 in 7 people having it, you might know somebody, whether it's family member, friend, or colleague, and it's helpful to understand what they're going through and how best to support them.
Yeah, because I've always wondered, because I do not have it as far as I know, exactly what it is. I always have not made fun of, but made light of the name because I just think it's funny. It's like in the comic book world, you have the uncanny X-Men. So where they're actually canny X-Men. But I don't know what irritable bowel syndrome is.
Well,
I don't know what you're experiencing. I don't know any of that. I would like to so I could understand, but I don't know up to this point.
Well, stay tuned, because that's a great lead into the diagnosis. Lucy, I think it's a diagnosis of exclusion. You rule out cancer. You rule out celiac disease. You rule out some of these other things, and then you're left with, okay, this person still has a problem. And it's not just a single disease. And the triggers are not the same. They're different triggers.
Couldn't be more complicated, right?
Right. And so we still are wandering through the maze as to how to help people or how to work with that individual.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what makes it so frustrating for people that get told that they have this, because unfortunately there are still a lot of, sorry to call them out, but gastroenterologists that are just kind of like, well, we ruled out everything else. So here's irritable bowel syndrome diagnosis. Here's a couple medications that might help. And hey, have you tried the low FODMAP diet?
Oh, since you brought that up, we'll have to get in to explain what you just said. But that didn't happen until 2005 in Australia. This group of researchers down there That's not so long ago, y'all.
Yeah,
that's like 20 years
pretty
ago.
new.
It is 20
This
years.
thing called FODMAP. Now, what does that mean? One of y'all tell me.
Can somebody say what FODMAP, because it's an acronym, and
Yep.
I get embarrassed myself every time I try to say what it stands
Okay,
for.
I got it for you. fermentable, oligo, and then FOD, di, mono, saccharides, and polyols,
So big words that
Yeah.
just mean these are
sugars.
carbohydrates that the gut has a hard time digesting. And for people with IBS, it can cause changes and it can cause pain.
Yeah, but identifying those things in the foods we eat, because food is a trigger for some people. Stress is a trigger. The two of them together can be a trigger.
I like this book because they say it's a whole body guide, and it really, it doesn't point the finger at food or stress. This can be a little bit of everything. It could be mostly stress for you. It could be mostly food.
And it could depend on when,
Yeah. So,
where you are, which one takes the lead.
but Tim, let me read this because I think it helps explain. IBS presents with abnormal intestinal movements, a heightened sense of pain in the gut, and dysregulation of the gut-brain axis, a bidirectional communication pathway between the gut and the brain. In IBS, the shift in how the gut and brain communicate is a central feature. It's as if the gut and the brain are not talking to each other, but rather screaming with a megaphone.
Okay.
And if you're visual, I really liked this visual description where if you picture just a normal, quote unquote, normal gut, somebody that does not have IBS, after they eat food or are experiencing specifically after food, then you get these waves. So you kind of picture like
The
just a
surfer
general
that we just
up and
talked
down.
about. The surfer that we
Right.
talked about, yeah.
Exactly, the surfers. So they're on these waves, and for people that have been diagnosed with IBS and they can test the same postprandial, so after a meal, it's more of these like up and down jagged lines, and so it's just a lot less smooth, and so physiologically we can see the difference. So it's not just to say, oh, it's in your head, but it is 100% to say that your brain is involved,
Right.
because it's perceiving this is a lot more painful or yeah, just less, not so comfortable for people.
And people don't connect the dots sometimes, and they say it takes 6.5 years from onset of symptoms to diagnosis. So people are wandering around for 6 years knowing something's not right, but maybe not seeking some counsel earlier. And they probably are in denial because they probably think, oh, I got cancer, something like that, particularly if they have other kinds of symptoms.
Well,
but the pain is what I learned in this. It's a recurrent pain thing, like 1 day a week for 3 months. There's recurring pain. And that's, I think if you're, like those of us around people, we might see it before they do, if we're aware of it. It's like, you had that pain last week, and you're having this all the time. So maybe we can, help each other.
Lucy, I'm curious, with working with people and maybe your own experience, what tends to be barriers to getting, because the book says don't self-diagnose, right? But what tends to be the barrier to maybe noticing that you have a problem or seeking help to determine whether you have it?
Lots of things. It's a good one. Good question. There's the fact that I think kind of what Eleanor maybe alluded to, or is the fact that like we start to just become accustomed to what's happening. So you're like, oh yeah, every few days I get diarrhea. It kind of stinks, but at least, sorry, pun not included.
I was about to say, that's a pun.
It's a little unfortunate, but then I just kind of go about my life. So a lot of it is people get accustomed to or just start to live their life around their symptoms, and then there's the people that have gone to see a GI doctor and they've been told like, well, there's nothing wrong with you, so we don't know, out somewhere else. So that's a barrier. And then there's people like me that thought that we knew what we were dealing with. So I just kind of started dabbling with elimination diets. And that got me to a certain point on the journey, but it's like you have to realize that with any medical condition, but this one especially included, that it's a puzzle and it's different for every single person that's experiencing irritable bowel syndrome. And so they have to take an active role. It's not just like, oh, your blood sugars are high, you have diabetes. It's not that straightforward.
Oh yeah, let's.
Yeah, you have to go and eliminate all the other options.
Yeah, the thing that you brought about diarrhea, there are subtypes to this, I understand. You can have IBS with diarrhea, or you can have it with constipation, which some people don't know. It can have a mixed pattern. Sometimes you got constipation, sometimes you got diarrhea. And the other one that I thought was unfortunate is a post-infection, IBS, so like exposure to antibiotics has tripped some people into this condition, which is...
Or literally just an infection. I had the Grand Canyon followed by 6 weeks of a mysterious stomach virus where I just like couldn't eat food without intense pain. And then that was 2012, and the symptoms just kind of slowly built from there. And I wasn't able to do a vegetarian diet within a year because I couldn't eat beans anymore.
Yeah. So at that cellular level, we really don't know what's going on, but we do see an increase in mast cells, and we don't have any validated diagnostic tests to help people. So then you can go have, I mean, the book has a list of all the tests you could have, and I thought, oh my God, something about a balloon in there. And I went, I don't think I want to do that one, but I guess I'd submit to it if I was really struggling. And, you know, that enteric nervous system is really interesting. When you look at the gut, and since I like biology, it's in development, you know, you've got the outside world on the inside of your body. Yeah. It's just like an open tube from your mouth to your anus. And, you know, you throw stuff from the environment in and stuff comes out the other end. And hopefully your body's taking the good stuff and leaving the bad stuff. And then we've learned, oh, it's not just that. There's a whole different colony in there. You know, more DNA in our bacteria than in our human cells live with us and do these great things. They're making vitamins for us. They're doing, you know, recovery of nutrients. It's just...
They're digesting food for us.
Yeah, this
they're
little
protecting us.
Yeah, the ecosystem of our body is amazing, and we just can't really identify what... There's so much detail in here. But what I think you were just saying, people go in to the medical system, and if they have a GI guy that's good and knows about the tests and believes in this thing and has ruled out inflammatory bowel disease, which I think is really difficult to tease out from this one. To me, it's always been like, wow, those are similar.
Inflammatory bowel disease and IBS.
Yeah. But the dream team, the idea of behavioral things. So let's talk about the triggers. We've got food triggers because you talked about FODMAP. And we've talked about elimination diet a little bit.
And we can come back to that. But the book starts with the mental health.
Right. The other trigger is the stressors, anxiety, depression, those sorts of things. So anybody want to take a dive into that? Because that's where I think the revolution is coming in this. Is the dream team, you know, if you're a lucky person, you get an MD, you get a behavioral specialist, you maybe a physical therapist, maybe an RD, you know, a registered dietitian like you guys.
That's why I think this book is so important.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And why it could be overwhelming to read. I think it paints the path of the ideal dream team, and if you can seek that out. Yeah,
and she says, well, the referrals are interesting in the model of medicine that we're doing right now. I think maybe we're getting better at referring out to other professionals or bringing them into the practices with the MDs.
Yeah.
I've been out for about 20 years, but I was hoping that was where we were going. I don't know if we're seeing that. Are we seeing that? And then you got the funding. Who's going to pay for it? That's the other thing. The insurances and because that's an expensive team.
Right, that's one of the barriers.
Yeah, you got 4 professionals on a full-time salary. So.
Well, the book goes through very extensively the exercises you can do in terms of the nervous system regulation. And it starts as simple as I'm not going to be able to say it. Diaphragmatic breathing, which is a simple yet effective tool. Do you use that one a lot, Lucy?
More so since I listened. So we talked before, but I think it's good to say that this book is one of those gems that's great to listen to, because they do walk you through these mind body exercises, and until I literally laid on the floor and practiced them while I was listening to the book. And then we got to more of the testing and dietary recommendations, and I just kept thinking, wow, I really wish I was reading this in the book. So if you can afford to do both, I recommend listening and reading the hard copy.
I'm glad you said that, because I was reading the book, and when they got into the description of what to do, I thought, oh, I have to read, about, okay, now you need to lie down and think about your toes. And it's like, come on. So I think listening, you could experience it like you just said, because when you're reading it, you can't do it. You're mentally engaged in the words, but if someone's telling you, relax. Oh, I think it's a brilliant idea to listen to this one, and you need the reference book. You need the print so that you can go back and look stuff up.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and why these relaxation tips are so important for people with IBS is what's called the visceral hypersensitivity, that the book calls one of the root causes of IBS. So in people living with IBS, some of the wiring between the brain and the gut misfires, and they start to feel normal gut sensations that most people would not be aware of, right? Mm-hmm. And when you feel those sensations, they are more painful than what others without IBS would experience. So when you do those relaxation techniques, I'm asking Lucy, does that just kind of calm the nervous system so it lessens the pain? Or, I don't know, can you describe how that helps?
Definitely. It's amazing. So two parts to the same answer, which is, as far as back as I can remember, I used to get what my mom and I would call digesting knives whenever it was exam time. And this was years before I was ever diagnosed with IBS. So I just got this like really intense, sharp pain in my GI tract when it was exam time, because that's how my body did the nervous feeling. And I figured out somewhere in between college and young adult life that if I just lay on the floor, lay flat, and don't do anything and just kind of breathe, that it would pass. So thank God I figured that out before these tools came to my awareness. But then as I've, developed IBS later in my 20s and have come to live with it for almost 15 years now, I have realized that I can now take these exercises like they go through in the book, and then they also talk about hypnotherapy, so we can touch on that. And I can do like this guided meditation hypnotherapy and take it almost like medicine. So if I'm in an IBS flare, because I thought, it's been a while since I've had soy, I bet I can eat it now, even though I haven't since 2017. So every time I decide to give that one a test, I get to experience a little flare up.
So you have a food sensitivity.
Yeah, that's a very specific food sensitivity.
Maybe an allergy?
No,
just a sensitivity.
Okay. It's a sensitivity. So we'll definitely have to talk about what's the difference. But it's amazing how I can do these. It's very similar to the exercises in the book, and lay down in my bed or on the floor or whatever. And 10, 15 minutes later, I will say it's taken, let's say if it was like a 7 out of 10 discomfort, I can take it down to a 3 to 4 and just kind of be able to go about my day in a lot less pain.
Nice. I love that you say take it like medicine.
Yeah. The relaxation response check-in, the ideas that you all are talking about, we've read about them in so many of our books that are not related to IBS. This idea of grounding is one of the examples. She said, feel the earth. We've talked about that. It's good for all of us. And
it is.
So there's something about our lifestyle that we're maybe not paying as good attention to. And that's, I think, what our businesses are about, is helping people adopt healthy lifestyles and stay active, move. That's one of the things that's important. But the meditation, we've talked about that. And the mindful minute is something they talk about, just a minute of just calming yourself.
Yeah.
So the tools in here are great, and the explanations on it are wonderful.
They even talk about forest bathing.
I know they did.
Yeah. Get out in nature, and that helps calm us down too.
Well, and that idea of accepting strong emotions, that acceptance thing that we've learned about, when we read How Emotions Are Made, some of the ideas that came out of there is acknowledge them.
Right.
Know what they are and understand what you're experiencing, and it's okay,
Yeah. Acceptance.
Yeah. You were talking about exams and how the stress of that mental challenge can throw people into that stress trigger. And we've talked about the cortisol reactions and all the things that go on that then aren't good for the rest of the body either. But when you were talking about the stress of the moment, having the awareness of the tools to use is invaluable.
Yeah. And practicing them ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah.
Right? I think that's the key, and probably the hardest part for most people is I'm going to practice this skill when I'm calm so that when I'm stressed, I can easily utilize it.
She has a really good diagram of the mind, talk, gut thing and where you can intervene in it, Where,
the thoughts, the negative thoughts.
When you're telling yourself, I have an upset stomach, it's really going to be bad, now I'm going to miss the next thing. And then you psychologically talk yourself into a worse situation, and it gets worse. And how do you interrupt that is what I think these stress cycle interrupters are.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
much.
it's really a good reminder of, I think you go through the world assuming you're the only one experiencing this. And oh gosh, what's wrong with me? And how embarrassing.
And it gets worse.
How they just really normalize that, because whether it's 1 in 5, 1 in 7, it's almost a guarantee that somebody that's not coming out or not doing life to its fullest because they're afraid of what their gut is going to do.
Avoidance of behavior, they talk about that. Stop the over avoidance. They say don't quit your life because of this. And people do. They stay home because they're afraid to go out, need to be near a bathroom. I can't go to that thing with my colleagues because I could have an accident or whatever. But they say, if you can push yourself into that anyway, you might be healthier. I mean, the over avoidance of your life is not healthy. It isolates you.
Right.
It makes the situation
inhibiting.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Should get you a dream team and go out and live life again.
You brought up the hypnotherapy and the CBT. We've talked about cognitive behavioral therapies before, but they didn't mention tapping, which we have a colleague that's very excited about what tapping can do for us. And we did read a book about that technique, and I think there might have been something in there about this, that maybe you can tap into this as well.
About IBS?
I don't know. We need to go back and look at that. But reprogramming your thought processes.
Oh, mm-hmm.
So do you have any experience with, you said you wanted to talk about the hypnotherapy, or that you mentioned that it was there. Have you any experience with that?
I always said, so I learned about it from some people that are familiar, have IBS for a while, might know about Heather's Help for IBS. She's not a doctor. She's just a human that has been dealing with IBS since the 90s. And so and also really appreciates research. So she has a whole website out there. I love to tell people it's great to go to her website because it feels like a blast from the past, like something that was made in the 90s or the early 2000s. But she talked about hypnotherapy. So when I first started studying and trying to figure out how to help myself, I used that resource, and I was like, when nothing else works, I'm going to try this hypnotherapy thing. And, it sounds like I think it's a little intimidating. People are like, oh no, they're going to make me walk and talk like a duck in public. So I'm not going to try that because that sounds embarrassing and I don't know what they're going to like hypnotize me into. But really, I like to tell people, for me, my experience is it's very much like a guided meditation, but it does, if you can get yourself into the habit of doing that. There's a wonderful app that's been developed in the last 5 to 10 years called Nerva, Nerva, and it's gut directed hypnotherapy. And they have so much research now out there that it's actually shown to be as effective as this elimination diet that we've touched on, the low FODMAP diet. So for people that either just don't have the bandwidth to do elimination diet, or it's not recommended for other reasons, it's nice to know that this is another option and that it's been made really attainable for just the everyday person. And it is a little bit of an investment to get the app for a year, but I changed my life. I was doing my third blood test elimination in 2023. And after 2 or 3 weeks, I was like, I don't feel that much better. I think this is the time to start hypnotherapy. And when I added hypnotherapy into my life, again, just 10 to 15 minutes a day to make it like as much of a practice as I could, I was amazing. I was like, oh, wow, why did it take me so long to try this? And I think the same could be said for CBT. So if you're not up for the hypnosis thing, but you're okay to go find somebody that does cognitive behavioral therapy, that can be just as helpful.
I think one of the recommendations they're making, though, is if you can seek one of these professionals that has experience with people with GI problems. Yeah. That would be the best. Not just anybody that does CBT, which is good. But I mean, if you can find that person who is really reaching out into the gut issue world, that would be good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there are hopefully more and more of those people coming along.
I hope so, yeah.
Or we could encourage them to. Hey, if you're as interested in prevention as I am, contact me, Eleanor Russell, at 360health, 4U.com. Whether you're interested in financial wellness or physical health products, 360 Health invites you to become part of our community.
Well, you mentioned diets, so maybe we can circle back to how food causes GI distress and IBS. So the book calls out that eating-related digestive distress occurs in upward of 80% of IBS patients, so definitely a big component. And food can influence a variety of factors that are leading to these symptoms, like speeding up or slowing down, how fast food moves through your gut, increasing the sensations that you feel of your digestion, and then making those brain-gut interactions more pronounced and not in a good way. And also changing your gut microbiome, which we talked a little bit about. And some foods can also increase the intestinal permeability, which means allowing things to kind of pass through the walls of your gut that aren't necessarily good for you or supposed to.
Yeah, I like the idea that they mentioned that leaky gut syndrome that we're talking about a lot, and some of us talk about it a lot. It's not really a real thing. We haven't clearly defined it, but we know permeability is changing.
Right. It's interesting that we say it's not a real thing. It's definitely not defined
physiologically.
Well. But there is research, and we know that this intestinal permeability is an issue, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But we don't know the mechanics of it, I think is what they're saying. Yeah. It's like we know it happens. We can't get a good description of it to be able to intervene with it, right. In that way.
Right.
I like that thing about if food is the trigger for your symptoms, then this is a good path to go down. And so acknowledging, when I eat the soy, this is when I have the problem. When I'm taking the test, this is when I have the problem. Those are different triggers, I think.
Yeah.
So being able to tease that out. Once you know it's when I eat something, then I have a problem. Then, this is a great idea. And the idea of elimination diets, let's tell people a little bit what, as I understand it, you all correct me, okay? You're going to remove stuff from your diet. Let's say dairy, maybe wheat, maybe chocolate. Just, and how long? Maybe for a week, 2 weeks, or something, you get it out of your diet?
About 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
I'd say at
Then,
least 3.
what?
I say at least 3.
At least 3,
because 4
okay.
weeks can feel really hard compared to 3.
Well, and I just want to interject that I really appreciate the different approaches in this book, from just the gentle diet cleanup. Maybe you just need a couple of things, versus the full-on FODMAP elimination if you're just really experiencing some issues. But why I say 4 to 6 weeks is because when you're reintroducing things, you still kind of have to stay at that baseline low FODMAP. But okay, sorry, go ahead.
Because once you've got it out, then you take one of them and introduce it back.
Yeah.
And experience it for an amount of time, let's say 2 or 3 days or a week. I don't know. But let's say you have a half cup of yogurt. Let's say you start with the dairy when you're coming back. You have a half cup of yogurt in the morning and maybe in the evening, and then with some other foods, but not any of the wheat or the soy or the things that you've eliminated. They're still gone. And then you listen. And this is an interesting thing. We need to learn to listen to our bodies. Understand how your body responds to the food. And that's part of intuitive eating, too, which we need to talk about. So do I have the idea that, and okay, I don't have a problem with the dairy. I didn't get extra mucus. I didn't get any cramping. I'm okay. So I'm going to leave the dairy in there, and now I bring on the next challenge? No. Okay. What, Lucy?
No, you have to take that back out.
Okay.
And then introduce the next challenge, because especially if we're talking FODMAPs, which is the direction we've gone, but even with any elimination, specifically with this low FODMAP, is a lot of times I always say the poison's in the portion, or it's a dose relationship.
Oh, good one.
So the reality is that sometimes you can eat dairy, but then if you eat dairy combined with these excess fructose, or what's the excess sugar? Yeah, fructose, that you find in apples or pears, then that double hit could be what triggers you. But you're not going to know, like, well, I was eating the dairy and then I added the apples, and I don't know which one caused my issues. So we need to just really get specific. So you add back one of the subgroups of these FODMAPs, and then you take it back out and you add in another one.
Do you take it out for another week?
You take it out until you're done with testing all of the subgroups, and there's about 6.
Yeah, but before you bring in that second one, what's the window between?
I do a weekly, because it's 3 days on. So you slowly introduce the new food. So you mentioned like a half a cup of yogurt the first day, 3/4 cup of yogurt the second day, and maybe a full cup on the third day. And then you take 3 days of what's called a washout. So back to just total basic low FODMAP. And then, day 7 or the next week, you start your next experiment. Maybe you're going to try mushrooms.
Okay, so this is why I think you need professional counsel.
You need a registered dietitian
coach
on your side.
Yeah, because this is where you could really mess it all up and think you'd figured it out, and then you didn't really. And then you're still not getting the results you want. So I'm all for partnering.
Right. If you're going to go through all of this, get a partner, make it easier.
But if you want to understand what you're going to get into, read this book, because it'll give you the overview of what's going on and what your registered dietitian is going to partner with and guide you through, because that's their profession.
And she has awesome meal plans, and they're all very balanced and delicious. So, yeah, definitely a good resource to use in addition to working with your dietitian. So let's talk about some of the gentle cleanups, shall we? Like, maybe you don't need a full low FODMAP elimination 3-phase approach, which I appreciate that we shared all 3 phases to that, because when we were talking about going to the doctor, they will just say, try a low FODMAP diet.
Oh, yeah, and no help.
And maybe here's a printout of the FODMAPs. So it's more nuanced to that.
Have
clearly.
fun. See you later.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck.
That's where we need more referrals.
Have fun storming the castle.
Yeah.
But maybe you just need a little bit of a gentle diet cleanup. I love this. So perhaps life is crazy. You're skipping meals. You're eating in the car. You're not drinking your water. Maybe you're having lots of fast food. Or maybe drinking lots of coffee. Those things can be big triggers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And they're so individual. So it's like, where do I begin? And I was literally listening to this book, and then I saw a client who is not in a life space to be able to do an elimination diet. So we went through step by step. Here's the trigger. How's your, fat intake? Have you been eating a lot of fried food, greasy food? How's your caffeine intake? What about your carbonation? My darling husband is realizing, like, oh, if I have two of those liters of carbonated water a day, then I have wicked heartburn at night. So he's learned he can have one, and that's enough. So yeah, it's just really like getting back to basics is one of the things that I've been practicing more since reading this book, because there's a lot of different testing and a lot of like getting into the weeds when it comes to your gut health. But sometimes we really just need to address the basics.
Yeah.
Well, on that gentle health or gentle, what do they call it? Diet cleanup, gentle diet cleanup. The first thing they have in their little bulleted list of about 20 things in this gentle cleanup is eat at regular times, 3 meals a day and a snack or 2. And there's been this big thing about
intermittent fasting.
Yes,
Yeah.
And keep your feeding window to 6 hours or whatever, and don't start with breakfast. And then the glucose lady tells us to eat beans for breakfast. There's so many people out there telling us what to eat that I could see someone throwing themselves into an eating disorder, diagnosable pretty fast, obsessive compulsive problems, and so anyway, I think that's a challenge with this as well.
And that's addressed in this book as well. She goes through very detailed all the different eating disorders, and I think that's important to call out.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, you want to be careful so that you don't end up, trying to fix a problem and create another one.
And it also, what you said points to that the struggle for some people with IBS is when they just think of or look at the recommendations for the general public, they don't necessarily work for them. Right? Like fasting could be a nightmare for IBS, you do have to have space in between your meals so that you can digest your food. That
Autophagy.
is important. The general thing to eat a lot of fiber. There's a whole section in here on, yes, fiber is important for people with IBS, but people's tolerance levels are different, and there's different types of fiber. So you got to get into that to really understand it.
Yeah, your solubles and insolubles and your viscous ones. Then that says take time to eat the meal, which is something Americans don't. On your lunch break, you run out. I can remember that awful story I've told. I had an hour for lunch, and I would run out of my office, get in the car, run up to Checkers or whatever, get the fries, the burger, the big Coke, sluck it down in 5 minutes, get back, park the car, get back in and do my job, Not good. None of that was good. And I was still hungry. It was like 5,000 calories, and it was all the wrong calories. But
you also didn't give yourself time to eat it or
no,
digest it.
I just inhaled it. But then at the end here, she's talking about fat food, minimize high-fat meals, goodbye fried food platters. And here in the South, that's something we love, the fried food.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask you all about this. In here, they said reduce alcohol and carbonated drinks, since you brought that up, to 1 per day for women, 2 for men, and carbonated drinks based on your tolerance. I thought our more recent recommendation is no alcohol.
From the Cancer Institute. Yeah. I don't think that that's really caught up. And since this book is specific to IBS.
Oh, this was written in, what,
Not
2024?
Cancer. Oh,
yeah,
I know, it's a new book,
yeah,
but I'm just
new.
saying, I don't feel like the public has caught up to that change
I think
from the
they
Cancer
were
Society.
afraid to take it away. I think people are still very reliant on their glass of wine at the end of the day. and they don't want to turn those people off from trying the other. Like 2017, I made the decision to get off of alcohol, and it was the longest 10 months of my life because every Friday my brain was like, hey, gin and tonic, IPA, anything? And I was like, no, sorry. My brain was so mad. I relied a lot on kombucha. And it took literally from February till October. So I guess it's not 10 months, but it was a long time before I finally got to a Friday that I was like, I'm totally okay not to have a drink tonight.
Yeah.
And that was really surprising for me. And so, and then now it's like, yeah, I would love a gin and tonic, but I'm really not interested at being awake at 2 o'clock in the morning when my liver's detoxing. And I really don't feel like having a low grade upset stomach tomorrow. So now I'm good. I'll just have my bubble water with lime and be fine. And that's fine for me, but I've done the hard part of like taking it out, and I can see why people don't.
Yeah, like you said, it took a while to feel normal.
Well, we read the Blue Zone thing, and a lot of the Blue Zone centenarians had their little glass of, what was that vodka that they had, mung.
Oh, yeah.
The Japanese ladies in Okinawa had mugwort vodka.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with their gals at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They didn't do it late at night. They did it. And the men in Sardinia, I think, were having their alcohol hit late afternoon, which is, a nice time to take a break. And Tim and I think life should be enjoyed, right? And deprivation of everything, it may or may not be the way each of us wants to go. So I think a lot of these recommendations of things, if you have an identifiable problem, then this is an issue you need to look at. And so I think that's the nugget here, because we are individual, and that's one of the things they're talking about in IBS. It's a very individualized experience and a constellation of problems that are hitting that one person that might not apply to the person sitting next to them, but they both have IBS. So anyway, and that's why I think these lists are great, because you have things to figure out. Maybe that's my issue. Maybe that's my issue. Or maybe, like you said, the combination of these two things are working against me. So you got something to work with here. And so I think it's a hopeful book. I'm very excited that we read it. It wasn't easy to read for me. I thought it was a little cumbersome. So I'm happy to know that listening to it was a different experience.
Mm-hmm. Listening was wonderful and helpful. And then if it's something that you're like, ooh, I need to know more, then, buy the book or go get a library and grab it from the library so you can get it in those two different forms.
Yeah.
Or just, contact wellbalancenutrition.com and we can tell you all about it, because you've got dietitians that are ready to help you on your journey.
Yeah, speaking of that, I'm Kristen Norton from Well Balanced Nutrition, and my special guest today is...
I'm Lucy Hayhurst, also with Well Balanced Nutrition.
So, as the dietitians of Well Balanced Nutrition, we'd love for you to visit our website and schedule a free clarity call. And if you would like to work specifically with Lucy, you can click to chat with her, and we invite you to do that.
And I'm Eleanor Russell at 360healthforyou.com, and I like to help people structure those lifestyles that help build and maintain good health. I have a wonderful natural product line that I endorse, and if you're interested in exploring that with me, you can reach me at 360health4u.com. Before we go, though, I wanted to say a couple of things about things I learned, and then one thing about the recipes. Can we go there?
Yeah.
Okay, so I like recipes. I didn't make any of them this time. I usually am the one that makes the recipes, and I'm always thinking,
and
Kristen,
I always leave you hanging.
Yeah, she's not in the game with me here. But anyway, I love their salad dressing recipes. I thought those were really nice. The rest of them I wasn't really crazy about. Okay. And that's because I think they leave out the things I like, the fat and all that stuff.
The garlic.
There's no garlic. Like the hummus recipe, I thought, oh man, that's going to be tough without garlic in there. But I guess you adjust, and so that's all good things. The let's see, there was another recipe thing. The lentil soup. They wanted Texas Pete in that. And I thought that the peppers and stuff like that was maybe not a good idea. So I thought, well, that's fun.
Everything in moderation.
Well, Texas Pete is from Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
That's right. Kakalaki.
Yeah, so Kakalaki, but no Texas Pete.
I'm suing because I thought it was from Texas.
And then their maple Dijon salad dressing, which I think is a lovely combination. But I would put balsamic vinegar in it. And I wondered, are vinegars an issue? It's a fermentable. And so one of the things they talked about in here was the osmotic. They said that people have problems with osmotic effect, fermentable effect, mechanical effect, and pharmacological effect when you have food intolerances. And that idea of fermentable, I got a cookbook that I meant to bring to Kristen on fermentables because that's a hot topic right now. And I had a friend send me something on, I think it came from TikTok, but I'm not on TikTok. But it was about making my own sauerkraut. And there's a discussion in here about probiotics, I think, and, the gut microbiome and all the teasing out of that. That was a pretty good discussion. But the thing that they were saying is sauerkraut was okay because it was pasteurized. Well, a lot of people are not, they're home making their stuff and they're not pasteurizing. So they had recipes in here, I think, that had some sauerkraut in them.
I love sauerkraut.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, when she talks about fermented foods, she says that there's some that are lower FODMAP, and if you're sensitive, then to avoid those. So, like kombucha, a half a cup.
Which she said got her through the alcohol thing.
But if you have a whole cup, it's high FODMAP. So that's where the poison is in the
dose
portion. Yeah.
But, it is a hot topic, the fermentables right now, and I thought it was good that they went into that. And then the intuitive eating thing, which we could probably have a whole nother deal on, but I wanted to talk about the social media because the experts that are out there from everywhere telling you what to do, and we had a Dr. Id's book, we read his Saturated Facts book, and that's kind of his challenge is when people are seeking help, they go online a lot of times.
A lot. Mm-hmm.
And so do you guys have any ideas about that?
Well, be careful who you listen to, for sure. And I think as this book calls out, you've got to find your dream team.
Yeah, because the social media thing to me is turning into a big marketing platform. People are out there engaged for an economic benefit. And so they're trying to market to you to get you involved with them so they can provide a service.
Yeah.
And so the buyer beware idea is what I think I'm coming up with. And that's one of the things that we try to do when we look at these books is look at who's given us this information and how is it published, because that's another screen.
Yeah. I was going to say that you are very big on who the publisher is and the reputation or
the process
of those things. So.
And while not always true,
No.
I usually look for credentials. Like we've said in the past, some people might not have the credentials you expect, but still have a lot of knowledge in the field. So, but I do always look, if I find something interesting on Instagram, I'll look at their profile and see if they display their credentials. And I'm always skeptical if they call themselves maybe a nutritionist or nutrition therapist, but they don't necessarily have those credentials to tell me how they got there.
Or a life coach.
Yeah, life coach.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't know.
But it is good to take that step, I think. And then you at least okay, I may have some questions here, but I'm going to engage because I think this is making sense. And we have found over time in history that some people come out with some against the common thinking ideas, which is what Hatchett said they were trying to do, is we're trying to introduce diversity in the thought, so that people can evaluate it and then maybe it gets to be more common, or it gets discarded because it isn't valid. And that's where I think the individual responsibility comes in here, is to make sure that we're at least stopping ourselves to say, hey, who's telling me this? And am I really going to do it based on what they told me to do? And I think, you're well served by that one little step of acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. I think that was. The other thing was the squatty potty. Y'all use squatty potty?
Squatty potty.
And the Bristol. Everybody needs to know about the Bristol stool form scale. That is good information. Look at your poop, folks. And I know that sounds weird, but it is not a bad thing to do. And I will say, the shock of seeing someone produce a chalky colored stool is not a happy thing. And so there's a lot of information that comes from what your gut's doing, and it can help save your life if you pay attention.
Yeah, and as dietitians, sometimes people come to us and they're like, this might be TMI. And we're like, no, that's part of our job. We talk about poop. It's part of digestion.
You rearrange the letters of my name, you get TMI.
Yes, you do.
And that's what I offer everybody.
Okay.
Is too much information. Yep.
Well, before we wrap up, I really want to ask this question of Lucy. Since some listeners don't have IBS, maybe, if they've stuck around with us this long, thank you. How can they support those around them that do have IBS? What do they need to know?
That first, it's not in their head. And second, it is really unkind to make them feel bad for foods that they maybe can't eat. So if you can just give them grace, a lot of people will eat the thing anyway and just suffer the consequence.
Instead of feeling called out?
Yeah, instead of feeling called out, instead of feeling like a weirdo or too fussy or too needy or whatever. Like, nobody really wants to feel needy. And so people just don't speak up like, oh man, I know you're making this pasta for this dinner, but can you leave out the garlic? Because that's my number one trigger. And that can be really hard for people to say. Everybody in my life knows that soy is not a thing that I can eat. And so they're all very cautious with me and very kind about it. But that's since 2017. I've been training these people for almost 10 years, this one food. And just helping people do what's good for them is the kindest thing. And whether that's taking care of their stress, encouraging them to see a therapist, or just tell them to listen to this podcast.
I would say, as someone who loves to entertain, I have learned to say, do you have any food issues that I need to know about before I plan my menu?
That's a good one.
And it's surprising how many people will tell me. And then I think, oh, shoot, now I have to make something else. But anyway.
But that's very kind of you.
I take the hit. And I sometimes do another portion.
Yeah, I was about to say, so what my mother does, because I have to watch sodium intake and my brother is diabetic. So she makes, generally, if she's making something, she will make the whole thing, take out a part of it, put it in a storage container, and then make the rest of it the way that
she wants
it, or what other people are used to. And then we are still able to partake while not putting ourselves in a position that's not good.
Yeah, and I do have friends that say, don't worry about it, I'll bring my own food. And that works too, but I typically try not to have them do that. Yeah. It's like, no, we'll work on something else.
That takes
away
some of the
but
stuff.
Them taking that responsibility also relieves, if somebody says, oh, I've already bought the food, and that's, so it's, it's a two-way street is what I'm saying. Yeah.
It's easy to make that extra, leave off the ingredients you don't need at the beginning and add it later.
I could see how someone might feel more comfortable bringing their own food, though, because that's that sense of
control.
Control.
Like, I know it doesn't have that stuff in it. Yeah. So, okay, well, this was a good discussion, guys. It was so much fun having Lucy with us today.
Thanks. Glad I could be here.
Yeah, we'll do it again, I betcha.
Thanks for joining us. And to the listeners, if you are interested in the book, please go to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast bookstore, which the link will be in the show notes.
It will be.
And I hope this provides some hope and some guidance for those with IBS and some understanding for those of you without.
Over and out.
Over and out.
Keep reading.
opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.